All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening, or good morning, good afternoon, depending on wherever you're joining us today. Welcome. Welcome to the 5-year anniversary edition of Agile DevOps DFW. Can't believe it's been 5 years already. Time flies when you're having fun. We are here for an exciting topic today. My former boss is here to share his insights on the path to agility, Corey Ladd. Before I introduce Corey, just a little bit of information about Agile DevOps DFW. So around 5 years ago in October 2015, a couple of interesting things happened. Justin Trudeau got elected for the first time as the Prime Minister of Canada. And three guys met at a Barnes & Noble near Beltline and Tollway and founded Agile DevOps DFW. So those are my partners in crime, Victor James, Fred Olson, and I. We hatched this plot. We had a vision, we had a dream. And I think now we are more than 2,000 participants or members of our group. So it's been a fun ride. So the purpose of our meetup has always been to explore Agile DevOps and the interconnections. We used to meet only on the first Thursday of the month at 6 Central, which is this time slot. And starting last month, we added another slot. So the third Thursday of the month, we meet at 11 a.m. Central. And some of you might have attended our last meetup in August on sprint reviews. We try to alternate Agile DevOps, but topics, that was the goal, but I haven't been successful. I'm always looking for DevOps speakers. So if you know anyone or you want to speak, I'd love to have you as a speaker. And if you miss any of our events, you want to look at the recording, all our webinars are available, at least the online sessions are available on YouTube, on our Smooth Apps YouTube channel. So go to YouTube, search for Smooth Apps, and you'll find the playlist, all right? So that's a little bit about our meetup. A little bit about my company, Smooth Apps. We are the sponsors of this meetup. We've got Scrum trainers and coaches throughout the world. And then we have an extended network of, I think, maybe 300 Scrum.org trainers and coaches. So chances are, if you need a coach in some part of the world, there will be a trusted Smooth Apps partner that we can bring in to help you. We've got a whole lot of content on our website. We've got blogs. One of my most popular blogs is the job description for a product owner. We've been posting new content on our YouTube channel. One of our most popular videos was how to be an effective Agile manager. We got more than 1,000 views in a very short period of time. So if you're interested, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And on smoothapps.com, we've got a bunch of presentations. We've got the webinar. Recent webinar was how to maximize ROI from Agile training, coaching, and consulting in partnership with the ROI Institute. And follow us on LinkedIn so you are aware of our upcoming events, new product launches, and so on. All right. So that's a little bit about Smooth Apps, a cause that is dear to our heart. Janie and I, we are on the board of directors for Agile for Patriots. Our goal is to give back to US military veterans and military spouses, military families for all they've given to us. So we do free Agile training, coaching, mentoring for US military veterans and spouses. So far, we've had 6 cohorts, 42 graduates. Some ways in which you can help us. We'd love to have you as a speaker. You can just give a 5 to 7 minute lightning talk. You can do a coaching session for our graduates, ask me anything. You can give short presentations. If you have internships available in your company, we would love to have our graduates attend those or participate in those. And of course, we'd be grateful for job opportunities, contract, full-time. We'll take whatever is available. If you don't have the time, but you have, you want to give back, you can also donate at Agile for Patriots. All right. Some announcements. One of our friends has working in PrimeVox had an opening. So they're looking for Laravel developers. So if you are, the company name is PrimeVox. If you are interested or if you know someone who's interested, please spread the word. Human resources at primevox.net, right? Housekeeping, we will be in listen-only mode. The participants will be in listen-only mode. Janie and I will be monitoring the Q&A panel, your comments panel. So we do want you to interact with us. It's just that it won't be through voice. Post questions in the Q&A. If appropriate, we will share them along the way. If not, we'll try and tackle as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. All right. So with that, I want to introduce Corey. As I mentioned, Corey, I had the privilege of working with Corey. He was my boss. He's one of the best managers I've ever worked with in my life. And Corey epitomizes what it means to be a servant leader. Very few executives get this. I had the privilege of working for a true servant leader as Corey guided a multi-billion-dollar organization on the path to agility. This is not a mountain that many have tried to climb and very few have survived it. So we are fortunate to have Corey here to share his journey. And with that, Corey, I want to welcome you and pass the ball to you. Welcome and take it away.
Okay, just confirming you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and I'm going to start to share now. And get you into slideshow mode here. Hang on. All right, you seeing my presentation up there in the single page?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Well, Ravi, thanks for the very kind introduction. Janie and Ravi and I were just talking, and I was saying that Janie is very lucky to be able to work with Ravi. I worked with him for a couple of years and have been friends ever since. And he is a good human, as we saw from the Agile Patriots, and unbelievably good at what he does. So thank you, Ravi, for that, and for putting this together and inviting me to share my thoughts. So I'm going to jump in and just start with a little bit of Dilbert. It is my favorite cartoon. I only read one cartoon in the morning, and it's Dilbert. I'm not really into any of the other ones. So take a minute. I'm going to just give you 15 seconds to read this one. So I thought that this was pretty dang relevant for transformation, because that's exactly what he's talking about here. And it almost to the T addressed every point that I'm going to get into in this session, which is, first of all, they're saying, well, why are we changing? You got people screaming, why are we doing this? Why do we have to change? We know everything already. And then you have people saying, well, what about my responsibilities? And, who's going to be involved? And they want to know about that. What about all the things that we already have going on and all these obstacles to getting it done? I can't do the work. I don't have time. So there's all sorts of obstacles and landmines that you'll face. And then, how do we communicate it? Is it being communicated, and how important clear, energized communication is? And then, the most important thing is around execution, really, making sure that you as a leader are being a good role model and focusing on that change. So I thought it was really amazing to see how much this tracked to what I'm going to talk about. That's almost like an agenda for what I'm going to cover today. So let me just pause for a second and just tell you how I got here and why I'm qualified, if you will, to even talk about this topic. I've run a couple of major transformations and a lot of different, project-oriented organizational transformational type projects. But two really big ones. One was Agile and a whole product lifecycle organizational change. And that was at an organization that's 10,000 people, 4,000 in the technology organization. And I also led an acquisition integration, bringing a company of about 300 people into that same 10,000 person organization. So guiding us through all the steps to get a whole company integrated. What essentially I feel like makes me qualified to have done those types and been involved and lead those types of initiatives is I've had a career where I started in finance and went into marketing and then went back to doing some M&A work and then started leading product and led product development and product management. And so I've had this really varied career, including living a couple of years in Krakow, Poland, for example, which gave me a real global perspective. And so when you do all of those things and when you're a product leader, I always say you have to be the CEO of a product, and having that type of a background has helped me think like a CEO when I'm looking out across the organization and thinking about the change that needs to occur and making sure that I'm involving all of the organization and stakeholders. So a little bit about me and why I'm here and why this is interesting and fun for me. So as Dilbert showed, I'm going to first talk about the why of transformation. When I think about why, I mean, it's really the challenge that we're facing typically is we're trying to create products that are increasing value for the customers, increasing value for the company. So, this is about driving revenue. It's about driving NPS. That's ultimately what people are making change for. They're not making change so that a team can write faster user stories. That may be a metric, but ultimately, what are those end metrics that a company is trying to get to? And the pain points that I've seen when I've been leading initiatives like this is things like this. So development labor, and what I saw was development labor was growing at like double-digit percentages, and so in the teens or high teens. And while we saw revenues growing at only low single digits, and when you have that imbalance, that you're in a bad place. Either you have to start reducing costs, or you have to do things that make your revenue go up faster. And I think a lot of the transformational stuff can help a little bit of both, but really it's about that driving that value for customers and bringing in more revenue. I was seeing poor quality deployments. So 15% of the projects that we had, especially in the largest projects, and at Sabre we had really big projects. This was the initiative I'm talking about in the multi-billion-dollar company I was with Sabre. And so this was we were seeing project leakage that was at a level that was unsustainable when you have that many situations where customers are finding the defects. So poor quality deployments was certainly a pain point. Delays, cost overruns, especially in a big organization like I've seen in other organizations. What I've seen is that you get these delays, that you have big complex programs that have multiple dependencies, and you end up with delays that go month after month, and you can end up with a year or 2 year of delays and cost overruns that are 2x or 3x. And this was absolutely what I've seen in the transformations that I've run. Also saw just a slowness in building and deploying software. There was an example that I remember where we were trying to just get our systems up and running, our hardware up and running, and it was taking literally 6 months to get a new server. And that just doesn't get you there. And when you have limited automation for a lot of the DevOps practices, the difficulty in getting products out the door is really exacerbated. And then you see what I was seeing was a lot of customer requests coming in, which can be good to get customer requests and informations, but also they were coming in and either not being addressed or turning into things that's like, well, I want this, and then now I'm escalating because I'm not getting it, or I'm getting it and it's low quality. So we're going to do this throughout the presentation, but what I wanted to do now is give you an opportunity to say, well, what outcomes would you have been targeting? I talked a little bit about the outcomes I was looking for. What else would you have been looking for?
All right. So please
So
enter your answers in the chat panel or the Q&A panel, and Jenny and I will be monitoring them. Then maybe we'll give you about 30 seconds, 30 to 60 seconds. And then Corey, I'll start reading out the answers as they come in. So
excellent. Thanks.
You're welcome. So again, just to recap, you got a sense for the challenges that we were facing. If you had been in these shoes, what would you have targeted as the outcome for Agile enablement? All right, starting to get some answers. So infrastructure, DevOps and Agile should go hand in hand. So that would be an area you would have focused on. Thank you, that's from Suresh. Lalita is suggesting, well, I would have focused on skill set shifts. Patrick, focus on improving clarity around deliverables from the teams. Maybe a few more responses, and then we will move on. Clear communication. So we'll have clear. Hugh says he would focus on clear communication, and Stephen is saying getting executives focused on cutting the work in progress. So Ravi is saying CI and CD. Very good. So Corey, got a wide diverse set of views. So back to you.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about the answers there is that you have some things like communication and things like that that are, you know, more like I look at them as lead measures, like things that if you do them, then if you improve communication, then you're going to end up with a better result and better lag measures, which I think people are also talking about some of these bigger lag measures. And the ones I think about that I think y'all were hitting on at some level were, you know, like net promoter score, what customers are doing, or how customers are perceiving us, revenues, sales, win-loss rates, or conversion improvements, how you convert your customers. So there's different types of things that we would be looking for. And I think you guys are hitting on both aspects of that, the lead measures and the lag measures. So, you know, the way I looked at it was, and this was actually, you know, in some ways, some of these topics like the bigger, better, faster, cheaper, that was one of the CTO's real, you know, like prominent statements that they would be saying. And the way you get there is higher quality, certainly producing products that are quality. I think somebody talked about getting, you know, the speed at which we, you know, deliver product and breaking down how you break down obstacles for the team. And then, you know, revenue, of course, that's a key one, and happier customers with things like an NPS score. So, you know, there's a little bit of a variety of, let's make sure we're covering those lag measures, but also that are like revenue, but also these lead measures like speed of the team and speed of deployment. Somebody mentioned DevOps. I'm going to talk quite a bit about that, and I think it's an area that's extremely important. So, you know, that kind of, you know, the why is actually pretty straightforward and almost always the same at every organization, in my opinion. It's all, they're trying to do it so they can make more for the bottom line. And typically it's to make more and continue growing, not to make more by cutting back or reducing the number of employees. So I'm going to actually spend quite a bit of the time in this discussion on planning and executing the transformation. And a lot of that's around, you know, how do we create those common practices across the organization and best practices from around the industry, but do that without cutting back on how you innovate, without stifling innovation, without stifling people's freedom and accountability for what they do. In the transformations that I've run, some examples of things that I've seen is, you know, in an organization, we were using 8 tools for PPM and SDLC, and that's project and portfolio management and software development lifecycle. So that's just so many tools that it makes it super hard to even do things like, you know, what about consistent reporting across the organization and consistent planning? And you know, we have to recognize that a lot of what we're doing in making some of these changes is to help senior management and the leaders like a CTO or president make good decisions, which means they need things consistent across the organization, which often will feel painful. Like, well, why do I have to do something the same as the people across the hall? It's because it helps them aggregate the data into something that's meaningful. You know, I also have seen situations specifically that I've worked on where, you know, a quarter of the developers were working on more than 5 projects at one time. I think all of you guys know that multi-threading, multi-projects, not being on persistent teams really slows you down. And I have some data about that later. We also were setting roadmaps far in advance. What was actually happening was we were starting our process where we would start the road mapping process for, you know, for say 2021, we would start it in May or June. So already you're a year and a half away from when you might release something. And then the budget would be set at the end of the year in December. And then all of that was like set in stone. And so you had this scope, schedule, and budget that all are like, they're on the roadmap. And that's what you're now measured against. And it was definitely a pain point. And so getting to a point where you make some changes around that is critical. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Teams constantly shifting, so there weren't persistent teams. Estimation in the project I ran was definitely a weak point and something that was inconsistent across the organization. And we recognized that you have to have different levels of fidelity of the estimations across the timeline that leads up to and gets into a project. Like that 18 months in advance, our estimates should be really low fidelity and low effort, 10 minutes or 1 hour. But when you get to where you're doing the user stories and you're starting to estimate for the next sprint, you need really high fidelity and estimates and clarity on what you're developing. And then I also saw that there was a prioritization of functional over technical work. And, I've always worked with my development partners to say, look, I'm building a roadmap, but if there's technical debt that we need to be building, I want that on the roadmap, because even though it's not a feature function or enhancement, I need to know that that's where some of my investment dollars will go. And so that was a real pain point when that wasn't happening. Excuse me. So the way I looked at it was really looking at it from a people, process, and tools perspective. And like I said, the project I was running was actually called the Product Lifecycle Initiative, and so we called it the PLC. And the first part of that was looking, when you think about the life cycle left to right, the project portfolio management, and I have a visual of this in a little bit, where you start to see what's the market doing, what are the competitors doing, and how are you thinking about the solutions and alternatives, to moving to the SDLC and actually developing and testing and launching the product, and then that DevOps piece. This was an area that, when I look back, I think I really would have wanted to focus more on DevOps up front, because I think so much can happen to improve the quality of deliveries, more so than some of the changes we were making in PPM or rolling out tools. And so getting to that point where the operations and operating a product and, sometimes sunsetting a product, that's a piece that is really critical in executing a whole product lifecycle initiative. And then making sure we have meaningful value-based metrics, and those are the things that I was talking about earlier. So breaking this down a little bit, the people, process, and tools, thinking about the people, the things that I felt like made us successful in what we were doing was, first of all, it had real top-down leadership. So this was driven by the chief technology officer, the president of the organization, the CEO. All of the top level people in the organization were investing in this and thought it was critical. And part of that investment was, we need a transformation owner. You can't just go to each of the development leaders and product leaders and say, oh, can you just do this at 20% of your time? And it's like, well, no, I've got a real job I have to do getting products out the door. So having that owner was, I think, a real lifesaver in this project, actually. And that's what I was fortunate enough to be able to do. And I'll tell you, for those of you that are thinking about doing stuff like this, I actually volunteered to be on the committee that was doing this PLC. And then just by happenstance became the leader of that committee. And then eventually we said, hey, this needs to be a full-time job. So it was really an accident that became a full-time job, and it was a full-time job for over 2 years. So the process piece of this is, thinking about that, improving that road mapping process. And, like when I think of roadmaps, to address that pain point I talked about earlier, the roadmaps, when you have a roadmap and you're trying to think about 2 to 3, let's say 1 to 2 years out, the level of confidence that you have for a 12 or 24 month part of your roadmap should be really low, and that's okay. But as you bring it backwards and you're inside of 30 days or 90 days or 30 days or inside of a sprint, you should be able to be making much more your commitments with a greater level of confidence, higher confidence level. So that was a key thing on the roadmaps. We were rolling out Agile. We were doing DevOps. I talked about. We were changing that estimation process to be a little bit more varied across the, again, as you get closer, becoming more high fidelity in the estimates. And then also just thinking about processes. This is not one size fits all. When I was in an organization of 10,000 people, we had products that were very independent products, a website that operated on their own. They didn't depend on any other teams. They didn't depend on any other integrations. Those could run very smoothly and really jump into an Agile or a Scrum team process very quickly. Those projects that were super complex, that, at a company like Sabre, you had ticketing and pricing and front end work and database work, and there were teams from all over the organization that might have to roll out with one release, and they could take 12 or 18 months. And we would try to size things to do them smaller, but when you have that big of a complex program, you have to change the way you think about rolling out a transformation. In this case, it was like you can use really pure Agile at that product team level, and for these big complex programs, you could use something like SAFe, and that was one thing we were rolling out. And then on the tool side, we rolled out one PPM tool. We happened to use CA PPM. We rolled out one SDLC tool, which was Rally. And then we put a lot of automation into the DevOps side of the house. And, as I recall, it was things like Git and version control capabilities. So there were, again, I took 8 tools and I took them down to 2 from the PPM and SDLC side, which was a big, a savings of money and a savings of time. So this is just a view of a PLC, and I think this is a really important way to think about it, because there were process changes that I was looking at in every box on this page and making sure that we had stakeholders around every box on this page. And it covered everything from, that beginning market planning to all the way to retirement, and then at the bottom, the go-to-market planning as well. And some of this framework was actually from pragmatic marketing. So a very simple way to think about it, but this was how we broke down a lot of the tasks and a lot of the transformational efforts that we were doing. And we actually put a heat map on this to show which areas we had a strong, good process that didn't need changing and which ones did need changing. So I'm going to pause there again and, get a sense from you on, what specific metrics you might have used to get those outcomes that you were talking about. So Ravi, I'll turn that to you.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Corey. So again, walk in the shoes of Corey. Imagine you are the product owner of Agile enablement at a company. Given the context that you just learned about, what leading and lagging indicators or metrics would you use to measure your progress along the way? Give you about 30 to 60 seconds. I'll be monitoring the answers and then reading them out as they come in. Please use the chat panel or Q&A. Right, so an idea from Kashif. Thank you, Kashif. Don't want to bias people. Give you a few more seconds. All right, starting to get some ideas. So Kashif, cycle time from idea to customer. Lalita, balanced scorecard with financial, operational, product, and customer metrics. From Suresh, velocity. We've got some Sabre alumnus on the call, so they're familiar with the context. So bunch of good ideas. Time to market from Ravi. Develop, deploy, deliver, done. Very good. Any other ideas? We've got cycle time, balanced scorecard, velocity, time to market. All
yeah,
right.
you guys are like right on with some of the stuff. You know, in addition to the big measures of revenue and NPS that we talked about, or sales, win-loss conversion rates. You know, I really liked the person that mentioned a scorecard, right? You have a dashboard. In different companies that I've been at, we've had different dashboards, but you know, there's one that we actually had something we called a placemat, and it was, I don't know if y'all can see it, you know, it was like one of the big sheets of paper, but it covered all parts of the organization and how we were doing across quality and across budgets and across velocity and agile metrics. So I think that's a really good way to think about it, and certainly the way executives think about it when you're, you know, I think that's part of what we're trying to get to here is how do you help an organization do something like this in the roles that you all play. But these are some examples of the types of things we might measure, and you know, these are all good. These are all going in the right direction from pre to post agile. You know, fewer days for feature function. Testing, time and process, that was something somebody mentioned. Having unit test coverage, so the, you know, automation measure, cycle time, a couple of y'all mentioned that. So that's just some of the examples of what we use. We had many, and certainly we used the expertise of Rally to help guide us. I actually remember we got this information from Rally, and it was, you know, talks about teams with low work in process. You know, they are 4 times higher quality and faster time to market. And stable teams, dedicated teams, again, more productive, more predictable. They get better at saying, hey, I'm in this sprint, I can get this much work done with this many stories. They just get much better at it because they're fine-tuned. So I think there's just a lot of, these are lead type measures that when you take it out all the way, you end up with a better quality product and a happier customer. So now I get into, you know, as Dilbert talked about, well, who's involved and what are our roles and responsibilities and all that. So, you know, that's the challenge for me was always just, you know, how do you get all the right people? Because it's a lot of people from across the organization and just a very diverse group of stakeholders, whether, you know, in my normal job as a product leader, I'm getting stakeholders involved to roll out a product. In this case, we were rolling out a whole process, so it was even broader. But whenever you're dealing with product, you're going across the whole organization. And you know, the pain points that I was seeing and how they were manifesting themselves with, you know, sort of this idea of different circumstances across the company was, you know, there was one BU that said, hey, we're really mature. You know, you don't need to do anything with us, but their maturity was out of line with reality. And it was also out of step with what we were trying to do as an organization. And even though they might have been stronger, we needed them to get in line so that we were all doing things in lockstep. And so that was a challenge we were facing. you know, another group was very collaborative, and that was easier to work with. While one of the other business units was immature. It was only a couple hundred people in the organization, kind of a small business unit, and they were much more scrappy. And they're like, we can still do this on spreadsheets. We don't need an SDLC or PPM tool. Just we'll keep doing our Kanban or whatever and just get it done. So, you know, you have all these different groups that are operating at a different level, and you have to think about that as you're selecting people for the team and as you figure out how to communicate. The other thing that I thought was an interesting pain point was just that budget process being incongruent with how Agile practices work and estimations. And I talked about how the budget process started in June, ended in December, but was for all of next year. And it just led to situations where you had fixed deliverables for what we did. And I've talked about how you change that mindset by really committing to the things that are earlier on, and making even though you're setting a budget, making the organization aware of and comfortable with and accepting of the fact that things later on in the pipeline are going to change, and let's not measure ourselves against that exact scope. And we made pretty good progress against that, and I've made good progress on that in other companies. Marketing and sales was, you know, they were selling to the roadmap sometimes, and that makes it difficult. And so you have to get marketing and sales involved because of that. And the marketing organization, the legal organization had contracts that were fixed. They had fixed budget, scope, and date, and this is literally how it went. And so you have situations where, you know, an airline is cutting over and everything has to occur. Everything has to be done at the same time. So while there was a little bit of ability to manage scope, it was very fixed and made it very difficult. And, you know, I think you have to back up the transformation into the sales process, into the legal planning process and budgeting process in order to change the way things are done when a sale actually occurs. So, with that in mind, you know what, I think I'm gonna skip this one because I kind of already teased this one out a little bit. And when I think about who should participate, you know, honestly, it's everybody in the company. You know, of course, it's not everybody they have to have as an immediate stakeholder, but certainly started with product and R&D as the foundation. Brought in those marketing, finance, legal, support sales folks because I needed to change some of the upfront processes before things even happen and product sales were even made. The executives was really critical to get them involved, have that top-down ownership, get them trained. Implementation teams, they're out there delivering the product and they're hearing a lot of what's happening and they're seeing where the quality issues are. So they can really help with that process and help us back up into some of the DevOps things that help with more effective delivery. I brought in an amazing enterprise coach. That would be our buddy Ravi here from Smooth Apps, and then we had coaches all over the organization, and they stayed in each business unit of the organization, but we matrixed those people into Ravi, and that really helped create a common bond and a common theme that we operated as one company, and that helped us be more consistent. I put customer input here partially to remind me that I need to do that in our transformation that I was running. We weren't getting a whole lot of customer feedback, and that's in a retro in my head, that's something I would have wanted to do different. So the types of things I did that helped me were the type of people I got involved. Like we had these people, and you see this in a big organization, that were ops people. They were almost like a chief of staff, or they were people that ran the dashboards or the reporting or the metrics for an organization or a business unit. And there's you know, in my organizations, there was typically somebody that did that. And I was able to find in those 3 business units, I found those people, and those were some of the first people I went to. And they helped us define the problems. They helped us do the heat maps, and then I could go out into the organization to figure out what needed to be changed exactly, and what what those changes would be. I sought out passionate volunteers. So I remember I had this DevOps guy who was you know, he ate, drank, and slept DevOps, and his manager was really supportive of the whole Agile transformation, but they were the ones that really pushing me on the DevOps side. You know, I was struggling to get momentum on the DevOps side. And so finally I just went to him and said, I don't know what to put in the PowerPoint deck on this that says, what are we going to do? And he, you know, I think 50 PowerPoint slides later, he laid it out. He said what the tools were. He gave us the why and the how. And it was amazing. And that really helped build the momentum there. I got the leaders to help me define who on their teams should get involved. That seems pretty obvious, but doesn't always happen. You know, you don't want to just go around and find people without the leaders supporting that. And I did leadership training first. We actually had Rally come in, and the first training we did was to leaders before we went out to the organization. And that was not only on Agile, but it was on being an Agile organization, not just an Agile development and product organization. And then there were a lot of little teams around the company that were already doing it and doing it successfully, or implemented some of the things that we were recommending and did them successfully. And so I sought those managers out, and they would come speak at town halls with me. They would be my proof points. They would be my success stories. And a lot of what I did on communication was things like this, which is, you know, just putting out almost like a marketing piece to say, look how much we've done. We've trained literally thousands of people. We've put 3,000 or 4,000 people on Rally. We've had all these executive events, in the dozens of executive events. And then you see on the right, you know, the types of training that we did, and on the bottom left, globally, that we were all over the place. And I always had the successes and proof points listed that said, hey, this team increased velocity, and that resulted in, you know, 10 new customers that we weren't expecting to get. So, so this is just a question for you guys again. What else have you used to get stakeholder engagement? You know, what techniques have you guys used?
And Corey, I want to get your feedback. Sarah asked a question: how many people were leading the transformation? Was it Corey, or was there a leadership team? Would you like to take that question now, or would it be better to table it at the end? All right. Yeah,
I'll take questions anytime. I was the single leader of the PLC transformation. There actually, the one we were doing, we actually had multiple transformations going on in other parts of the organization. But I was the product lifecycle leader. I had one project or program manager, and then I was able to bring in the enterprise coach. And other than that, there was some other stuff that I was managing just to make it simple for the organization, and to have you know, just to move some folks in under my wings. But it was really just me and two other people, the coach and a program manager. And I think I would actually say that's a pretty ideal situation. The leader needs to be out evangelizing and guiding and setting the strategy, and really doing a lot of talking to the organization. And the project manager helps hold the organization accountable and make sure there's timelines and things like that around it. And then the coach is really rolling out the concepts and the best practices, if you will. So, yeah, good question. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. We'll have one more question from Hugh, but we'll take it from at the end. Hugh's question was, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice or any advice when you started out, what would that be? So we'll take that maybe at the end. So right now, let's go to Corey's question. Share your advice to other practitioners, other people who might walk in Corey's footsteps, or who might guide an agile enablement in a large organization. What have you seen work effectively as you try to bring people with you and get stakeholders engaged? So again, 30 to 60 seconds, I'll be monitoring your answers. All right. So some observations and suggestions from Suresh. Having buy-in from the top makes a huge difference. Piloting and involving successful managers who are passionate makes things easy. Ravi suggests use discovery sessions and surgery sessions for early shared understanding through effective communication and collaboration. And Hugh's got a great idea. I would provide food. If you have good food, you can work with others. Phil has an idea, meaningful results that impact their personal goal early. So give them some quick wins, some in terms of things they care about. What's in it for me? Meaningful results, okay. And Kashif's idea is wait for a problem to arise, have a burning ship, have a crisis. And then if the crisis is there, then people will buy in, they will be involved. Maybe last answer, Michael, buying from everyone in the organization and using other companies as a comparable today versus future. It helps executives to get excited and want to be like the other company. Awesome. Great ideas. Corey, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about a couple of those. The food is the most important one. But the crisis one is, you know, there's almost always a burning platform. I mean, if you don't do if you keep doing it the way you're doing, you will sort of wither on the vine, basically. And so that you have to, even if the crisis doesn't exist, because I actually hate to wait until the crisis actually begins, you can show people where that crisis is about to start. And so I think that's a really important point. Somebody mentioned the discovery sessions, which I thought was a really good idea. One of the things we did was we had wall walks. And so, and that may have just been a term there, but we had wall walks where, you know, really we'd have every stakeholder, and we would be, you know, walking through what is the plan that we're trying to achieve here, and what are the steps we have to get to. So even for just running that program, you know, as an Agile program, and I think that's probably the biggest thing I learned to answer that other question is you have to run a program as an Agile transformation, or any kind of transformation as an Agile project. You can't just try to do it all at once. And there was a little bit of that I'll talk about in a minute also. I'm conscious of the time, Ravi, so I think I'll skip this one.
Yeah.
But think about what landmines you might have had, but you know, the landmines that I have had observations around are, you know, so first of all, the challenge is that everybody's busy, as we saw in Dilbert, and has their own priorities. And, you know, they just adding transformation to their plates was crazy. So, you know, and I saw that, you know, the different BUs, they all had their own version of it. They all had that one that had the big placemat that I mentioned. And this was a big problem. I know Ravi and I have talked about this many times, that you know, people catered to what they thought the number should look like. And that includes me. You know, I was trying to find teams that represented what we were trying to show, as opposed to just getting teams to set some goals and actually deliver on them. So you have to be a little bit careful of that. And really just managing those landmines is anticipating, asking what might they be? Think big. What is the whole PLC? How do you look at it? But bite off those small chunks. Bite off one box at a time. Bite off one team at a time is really critical. Find those passionate teams that are willing and early adopters, and that just builds momentum. I remember a video that Rally showed where it was at this concert, and everybody was sitting down, but there was one person who stood up and started dancing. And they started dancing, and there's a video that just watching them. And about 5 minutes later, another person came over, and then a few minutes later, another person. And the next thing you know, like, all these people are around them dancing, and it's because it's that momentum. It's like, hey, I know this feels good, and when you guys realize it too, you'll do it too. And that's what happens when you find teams that are saving money or producing better quality software. And let those teams be involved in the process be involved in inventing the process and selecting the tools. The more you get them involved early, and I think somebody may have said that too, getting those teams involved, it just gets more buy-in when you roll it out. And as you roll it out, you may have a toolkit of KPIs or metrics, that's key performance indicators or metrics, but do it for that specific team. Let that team decide whether they're trying to improve their speed or their quality or their predictability. Let them decide what they want to do. And then I'll finish with a couple of thoughts about talking to executives. So I think I'm going to skip that one as well, so we can get to some questions. Engage those senior leaders first, as I've talked about that we've done. Then what I did was I started going to their staff meeting. I helped them communicate that message. I brought proof point stories to their meetings. I evangelized at town halls and brought those proof points, and I got external sources to train the team, like from Rally in that case. The examples I have here are pretty poignant in that, these are the types of scenarios that I've had to deal with. You have a very dictatorial leader who is extremely supportive of the transformation, but goes in to their staff meeting and says, "This is what you're going to do," and doesn't get any input. You have another leader there in the middle who I would go talk to, and they would say, "Yeah, that's great." They put a big smile on their face. "Yeah, that is so the right thing to do." And then you would leave the office and they would do nothing. They would not provide volunteers. They would not provide help. They would actually be an obstacle to the process. And what I did with those was not trying to undermine them, keep them involved, but I would make sure that I went to team members who had those successes and get them to bring those stories up and show it and show how it was different and show how it could work. Because in a case where there was a leader that's dictatorial, have them bring it to the team and show the others that there could be, that what the dictator is saying may actually be good, and here's why. And then on the right, you have the leader that's saying, just get this transformation done in a year, it'll be fine. And that led me to that problem I talked about earlier, which is I was trying to roll everything out at the same time and trying to push it out to every team. And really what I think you have to do is go team by team. And that was just a huge learning for me. So when you're talking to these guys, it's helping them understand there's not a lot of research sources required. And I say these guys, these ladies, whatever they are, these execs, that we're going to increase their revenue. We're going to get customers off their back. We're going to help them be like Fortune 500 companies, which everybody wants to think, oh, I'm using best practices like a Fortune 500. So last slide here is just around my key takeaways, which was I think some of what y'all were asking, which is do the people and the process before the tools. The tools is sort of an easy piece. Either you have to do them side by side, or make sure your organization is structured and that your processes are on their way to evolving before you put your tools in place, because otherwise the tools will be implemented with the old process. Be agile to roll out an agile or transformation. It can't be a prescriptive course. It has to be flexible along the way. Engage the whole company and get those proof points. Go small with everything you're doing. So that's it for me, Ravi. Are there more questions, or can we take a couple of questions here still?
Yes, we still have time. So we got a bunch of questions. So one question from Sarah was, when we had these other parts of the business which were also undergoing a transformation, do you have any advice on how to make the other transformations stay aligned with the Agile transformation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the way we did that was, it's almost like we had a scrum of scrums of the transformational leads. I have to admit I'm blanking on what some of those other transformations are. Ravi, maybe you remember, but there were several things going on, and we were actually bringing our own metrics to the table, and we did have a big dashboard that we would go through every month where it was focused on just the transformational activities. And so I think when you're in a big company, having that alignment and getting together with those leaders to really talk through it and be open about it was critical. And for me, I always feel like that personal engagement with those other leaders to help make sure that I'm going to their meetings, I'm presenting at their discussion groups as well, to make sure that we are sharing information.
Very good. Thanks, Corey. Thank you, Sarah, for the question. Question from Phil. What were your top 3 KPIs?
My top 3 KPIs, you know, I would say it goes back to that page that I had. I mean, I think the things that I was I thought were most important were NPS, revenue, and then quality, some sort of quality score, and velocity and speed to market. Those were the things that I felt like were most important to track at a high level. And then there were a lot more low level metrics.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Phil. Probably the last question from Hugh. If you could go back in time and give yourself any advice when you started out in Agile, what would that be?
When I started out in Agile and in general, not just for a transformation. Yeah, I mean, for me, the thing that I think is I've learned the most is how important it is to do things small. You know, there's too many times that you have to stay focused. You have to have that persistence of your team and of the people involved, and you have to make things in small chunks. And I've been on too many teams that are always doing things big. You know, the epics are too big and the projects are too big. The timelines are too long. So that's what the thing that I would focus on. Anything else, Ravi?
Very good. And the log on that is user stories. Oh.
Yep. Anything else, Ravi?
Can you guys hear me?
I can now. You broke up for a second there.
All right. I'm sorry I broke up. I turned off my video. One last question, if we have time. So one question from Michael is, I see a lot of fake Agile teams. So when Agile becomes ceremonial and makes teams ineffective, do you have advice on how we can get them to be more effective?
The thing that I agree with you. There are a lot of teams that are just doing the ceremonies. I think you know, at a minimum, I think one of it's around having a leader, and that you know, and I'm talking about, it could be a scrum master or a tech lead or something like that, and having that person who really understands it and is passionate about it, having a coach jump in there and help them, and having them set, you know, an individual goal that is specific to their team, that is, hey, you know, we know our team, this is the area that I want to improve in, and just pick one thing and get them to see that if they do implement something different, that they can get better, and how it does affect what they do. So, you know, that's how, you know, you got to get teams to experiment with it, if you will.
All right, very good. Corey, thank you so much for making the time to share your journey. I know this is your first week at a new gig. There are plenty of things you would much rather do, but you took time to share your wisdom with us. We are so grateful. Yeah. And for our attendees, I hope you found this useful. Each organization is a complex adaptive system that's unique. There is no cookie cutter recipe, but I hope that you got some questions at least to think about, and possibly some ideas or experiments that you can try out. So with that, I thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the day or evening, and I look forward to seeing you at our next event. Until then, thank you, keep calm, and scrum on.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.